Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. More layoffs are coming to Canada's news industry. Bell Media's parent company has announced it plans to cut almost 5,000 jobs, cancel local newscasts, and sell dozens of radio stations, many here in BC. It comes as local newspapers face more shutdowns and the CBC looks at significant job cuts. What do you think about the state of local news in BC? How are you impacted? We're also going to get an update on BC's drought conditions. And in our second half hour, we dive into pottery with a new CBC show. I'm Dan Burritt, in for Michelle Elliott the rest of this week. Welcome to BC Today. And thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on the CBC News app. We're also on cbc.ca/BC, our webpage, and our CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Well, there are huge shakeups for news and radio across this country today after Bell Media announced it was laying off 4,800 people. It is also selling 45 of its regional radio stations, including 21 in BC alone, many in the interior and the Kootenays. We're asking you, how are you being impacted by the state of local news? And what is the state of local journalism where you live, be it radio, be it television, be it online, be it newspapers? We'd love to hear from you. Give us a call now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733 is our number in Metro Vancouver, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. The impacts of these cuts are widespread. CTV's weekday noon show in Vancouver has been canceled, as well as its 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. weekend local newscasts. And we'll learn more in the days to come. Premier David Eby reacted to the news this morning.
I heard today about the catastrophic layoffs of journalists, media workers across the province by Bell, the sale of dozens of radio stations. Bell and corporations like Bell have overseen the assembly of local media assets that are treasures to local communities. They bought them up like corporate vampires. They sucked the life out of them, laying off journalists. They have overseen the encrapification of local news by laying off journalists, and now they say, you know, it's no longer economically viable to run these local radio stations. It's no longer economically viable to have investigative news, and they were allowed to do this. The impact on communities in British Columbia of their unrestrained corporate greed, they made almost $3 billion last year, is profound. The fact that they cannot find it possible with all of their MBAs to operate a few local news stations in British Columbia to ensure that people get accurate, impartial, reliable information in an age of disinformation and social media craziness is such an abandonment of any idea of corporate responsibility. I find it reprehensible. I think it's appalling. And Bell and other companies like Bell that have done this need to be held accountable for the information atmosphere that we find ourselves in today. On behalf of all of the families of the journalists, the media outlets, on behalf of all British Columbians that have watched their local news stations slowly turned to garbage by these companies who now say, unsurprisingly, that there's not a lot of support for them. I just want to say shame on you. Shame on you. And I call on the federal government to stop this assembly of media properties that are not actually properties to the local communities they serve. They are an indispensable source of information. Thank you.
Premier David Eby earlier this morning. We're now joined by Barry Link. He is the chair of the Langara Journalism Department. Barry, thanks for being here. Appreciate your time.
I wish it was a better day.
Indeed. This has been the topic among many colleagues and friends across the province and across the industry today. We heard Premier Eby lay the blame for these cuts on media monopolies, What is your sense of what we've heard so far from BCE today?
Well, first to the premier, I'm sure he's happy to be talking about something else this week. And I also want to hire that guy for my copy editing class. The encrapification of local news, that's a golden phrase right there. But he's not wrong. In terms of we've allowed these large media monopolies to form, and now when they are making rational business decisions, this is the fruit that we are bearing.
We have heard as well from Pascale St-Onge, the Minister of Heritage, was asked about this. She is the federal minister that oversees the CBC, and certainly we're dealing with hundreds of potential job cuts here. Focusing back on BCE, the minute she says that they're waiting on some updates from the CRTC. Can the federal government intervene in any way, or at least in the way that perhaps David Eby is asking them to, do you think?
That's a good question. That's beyond my level of expertise to know, because it gets into CRTC regulation.
Fair enough. Yeah.
But that would be the arm, I think, that would have to look at this, because these companies are allowed to own broadcasting entities through licenses, and they make certain promises in terms of news that they're going to deliver. So that seems that would be the way to regulate this, essentially.
Now, this is the second major layoff for Bell Media. There have been others over the years. In fact, there have been lots, and we've seen this in other companies as well. So far, it's its largest. Last spring, they cut 6%. This one is 9%. Are you surprised at all at how it's gone?
It's funny. Every time this sort of pardon me, this news breaks, I'm asked that kind of question, and no, I'm not surprised. As an industry, whether it's broadcast, whether it's print, we've been going through this for some time now, and every time it seems to be worse. It seems to be a new player that is being affected, but it's not a surprise. What is a surprise maybe is that we really still have not come up with any solutions for this yet.
We know that Google finally inked a deal, if we can call it that, with the federal government to provide money to local organizations, and the CBC was a recipient of about $7 million of that. CBC News did speak with a portfolio manager, Patrick Horan, with Agilith Wealth Capital. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He said that the source of the cuts is that Bell has an outsized dividend policy for its shareholders. And he said typically companies pay 50% of their earnings to shareholders. Bell is paying about 130%. How much of a problem do you think that plays into it for the news industry?
I don't know that that's really relevant for the news industry, because Bell is making decisions as a corporation. They're making rational decisions, again, on behalf of their shareholders, which, if we're honest, that includes most of us, because we have, RSPs and pensions and so forth. So they're making those decisions partly on our behalf. I don't know that really has an effect in terms of who pays for news and how we pay for news.
And it's worth noting here, a colleague has just put in that CTV Vancouver used to have a noon show, noon to 1, broadcasting here in Vancouver and other parts of BC. It is currently showing a game show. I want to go to calls now. Rob is joining us in Vancouver. Rob, you have a background in the business. What do you make of what you heard today?
Yeah, well, so many things. The first point I want to make, this is my take, your guest can correct me if I'm wrong, I want listeners to know this. As you alluded to, the stations that carry news, they buy a broadcast license, use the airwaves. It's a public resource. There's only so much space in the airwaves. It's actually getting crammed because of cell phones. And they pay peanuts for that, by the way. It's like, very little money per year. They also, anyone who broadcasts over the air is guaranteed to be on basic cable. And in return for that great benefit they get, they're over the airwaves, if anyone uses that, in cities not so much, but they're on basic cable. They're supposed to provide local informational programming. It is supposed to be like the cost that they pay for the benefit of being on the airwaves and on basic cable is local information. But what they do is they go to the CRTC and they complain that they're losing money on the local news, and they're not supposed to make money on local news. It's a
Cost of doing business, as we say, right, Rob?
It is. It's a cost of doing business, but they want to make a profit on local news, and they want to cut it if they're not making money on it. And I don't think the CRTC has enough teeth. And to speak to the regulation matter, I learned in university there was like a royal commission way back in the 80s about media concentration. But like many industries in Canada, our government lacks the backbone against big corporations, be it cell phone companies, right, or media. We have what's called oligopolies in Canada. It's not a monopoly, but it's like groceries. You have a few big players who control the market. And the way you prevent that is you don't let so many corporations merge. But again and again, our governments allow them to merge because the corporate lobbyists have the money. There might be kickbacks because I don't know what the logic is of government after government allowing companies to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and it just erodes competition. It makes things less diverse, less sustainable, in my opinion, if we had more smaller businesses out there.
Rob, I appreciate your call. I'm just going to can I ask you one quick question? What's your background in the news business?
I worked I worked at City TV full time for a number of years. I still work there part time, casual as a cameraman. So there you go.
It's a tough day for a lot of people in the business, and certainly it has hit friends, colleagues, and viewers very hard. I'd like to bring in another call now. Barbara is joining us from Nanaimo. Barbara, thanks for calling. What do you make of what's happened today?
It's quite upsetting, to be very honest with you, because I watch this show every morning, and I look forward to the afternoon shows with the newscasters.
Yeah.
And when I turned on and there was another show on, it kind of hurt. Why is this happening? There's enough going on right now with job cuts, increase in prices. I find it very unfair.
You mentioned the friendship you feel with the cast, because you see them every day, right? The people that are providing you news.
Every morning at 6 o'clock on Channel 101.
Yeah.
And I look forward to when the school buses come on, the weather comes on, the late laugh, et cetera, et cetera. It's upsetting to hear that I might not see these people I consider family anymore.
Barbara, if I can ask, what do you plan to do now for your local news?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not quite sure. There's other channels, but it's not the same as 101.
Yeah, Barbara, we really appreciate your call, and I'm sorry that you're losing some friends
very shortly, because I feel part of the family.
Yeah. And that's a sentiment we've heard before. Barry Link, I'm sure you've heard that before. And really, whether they're readers, online, television, radio, people build a connection with people that they enjoy hearing from, watching, all sorts of things.
And it's, as a journalist and now as a person who teaches journalism, that's beautiful to hear. That's refreshing to hear. But the problem is that we are still not being successful at translating that support, that devotion from readers, listeners, and viewers into money. And money is what we need.
Yep. And we hear, and on a slightly smaller note, we do hear from people that, for example, colleagues who post stories to a website, whether, for example, it's a newspaper, Globe and Mail, or the National Post or something like that, and then people will say, well, why can't I read it? Why isn't it free? And they'll say, well, you've got to pay for the service. And, well, if you've put up the link there, why isn't it free? And they say, well, journalism costs money.
And most people don't understand how much money it does cost. And the fact that journalism, at least in terms of, the hard news side, it's never really paid for itself, with the exception of a few, major properties, major sort of news like W5 back in the day paid for itself, probably does not now. That's why it's one of the victims of the cuts.
Yes.
But what we do, we've always depended on other people to bring in the money for us. That source of money dried up, thanks largely to the internet, and we have not recovered from that. And that's the missing piece that we are still searching for.
And we ought to clarify that it appears that what's happening with W5, which is an award-winning investigative news program, has done some stellar work over decades, is now being rolled into the larger CTV national news program. So it's no longer, it's not being appearing to be eliminated, but it's no longer a standalone entity. And I think for a lot of people, that will be quite upsetting. On your point around paying for this stuff, how much impact has Meta's decision not to pay for news content so far playing into Bell and BCE's bottom line, do you think?
I think it's got to. I mean, we don't know because they haven't released the numbers on that, but it is a major driver of traffic, especially for print organizations or newspapers, or anyone that is putting tech stories online and wants those links to be shared. Facebook was always the biggest driver. So whether or not people will admit it, that's got to be hurting right now.
And what does this do when you speak with students who have probably watched newsrooms and news organizations go through reams of cuts? They get into the programs, they want to tell stories. What do you tell them on days like this?
Well, first of all, we promise them that we're going to train them. We're going to train them as hard as we can, and we're going to make them employable for whatever the future holds. There are still jobs. There's still a demand for what we do. There's still journalism out there. There's still jobs that are coming open, and we're going to make sure that they're competitive for those jobs. Perhaps there's also a process of self-selection where the students we're getting now, they know, like they're not idiots. They know what the situation is like, just as you said, and they still have a passion for this. What might be different is that they didn't grow up, especially the younger ones, watching news or reading newspapers in the way that you and I did back in the day.
Correct.
They want to be on social media. They want to be on Instagram. They want to do YouTube. And I think that, I was talking about the missing pieces. That is, I think, still a puzzle that we need to work out as journalists about how we pay for telling stories in those new forms. Actually, they're not new now, but in social media, in ways that we were able to pay for ourselves back in the day just with traditional print and legacy broadcast.
Jerry is on the line from Vancouver. Jerry, thanks for joining us. What do you make of the cuts announced today?
I really agree with everything about the fact that we have oligopolies, and I believe it goes to the government allowing this, not just in the news business. On the other hand, I look across Canada and the major papers in the U.S., and the LA Times laid off 13% of its reporters. But here in Vancouver, one, I don't have TV. I don't ever get to watch TV news. So I have to rely on radio and newspapers. And what I really miss is we used to have the freebie, the Courier, and the Georgia Strait as it used to be.
Sure.
The Courier gave us news on our school system and the park board and things like that. And the Courier, the Strait did really good long stories on, remember when they were first talking about the fish farms?
Yes.
That they were fantastic. And I just find that those are gone. I still read the Vancouver Sun, but I'm going to give you an example. Mr. Cooper that did Willful Blindness about money laundering and the casinos. I really did not hear CBC go in and cover that story. And he did it for the newspapers here. I think it was the province, which we always sort of go, ho, ho, ho. But anyway, he did that. But I want to say that I have, when I lived in the U.S., I was an NPR listener. No, I'm going to back up. I grew up with my parents, CBC, right? Remember, that's all we had in Yukon. But when he said, I forget what he said, crapification, I just call it dumbed down. I'm going to give you an example that CBC has been so dumbed down. And I have to tell you, I am so bloody upset because so much of the time for the last, I think since COVID, instead of reporting on really in-depth, important stories, the condition of our forests before we had the forest fires, we're talking about what's your favorite song to dance to? What's the last item you're going to take out of your fridge? I'm wondering if the people that are being attracted to these shows are the people that are on social media, because I'm not on social media. I do have to say, yes, I am on the computer because I listen to the world, which is one. But just my last thing is, I don't know where we're going with social media, but I do find I live in a building with young people, but then I'm surprised at the people my age, which is 77, and I'm just amazed at their ignorance. And so God help us in the future, because I don't know what they're reading on their phones. I have no idea. But when I try to have discussions with people about things, they don't know what I'm talking about. Like before you guys brought up about the car theft, I had read about it in the paper.
Jerry, forgive me. We're no, that's okay. We appreciate your call and your input, and I will defend my CBC colleagues who did cover money laundering, Eric Rankin, etc. We're just about out of time. Barry Link, we really appreciate your time and your perspective. A very tough day for a lot of people in this industry. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
My pleasure.
Barry Link, he's the chair of the Langara Journalism Department. Sorry about that. It's 12:27 in the Pacific time zone, 1:27 in the Mountain time zone. This is BC Today. Now, staying with this story, the CBC's Chad Possa this morning asked Premier David Eby about today's layoffs at Bell Media after his comments and whether his government is willing to step in with support for news outlets in this province. David Eby says the province is a supporter of federal initiatives.
When Facebook shut down connections to local news, including in the fire season in British Columbia, despite our overtures to them, please, Facebook, people need access to local news. Please, Mr. Zuckerberg, please turn on the local news for people fleeing fires. And they refused to do it because they were making a point about the federal government that they didn't want to spend a fraction of their multi-billion-dollar quarterly profit supporting local news. We said we're not going to advertise except for essential advertising on Facebook. And I realize that is a small measure. We're also going to continue to provide support to the federal government. They have authority over monopolies and competition law, as well as media regulation law. Previous administrations at the federal level allowed companies like Bell to buy up all of these local outlets and slowly over time turn them into one consistent outlet that is not responsive to local communities, and then react with shock that people are not as interested in watching, and then close those stations down. It cannot be allowed to continue. So we'll support them in the work that they need to do to support local media as well.
Premier David Eby speaking in Coquitlam this morning. We have much more on the story on our website, cbc.ca/BC. You can get that online and on the CBC News app, as well as on our TV and radio stations. This is BC Today on CBC. We're on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC, as well as on YouTube and the CBC News app. Coming up in our second half hour, we are going to get an update on BC's drought situation. And no surprise, it's not good. Darius Madavi will be here to give us an update. And we're seeing a surge in interest in shaping clay. Coming up, we'll speak with the judge on CBC's new show, The Great Canadian Pottery Throwdown. And we'll take your calls. Time for a CBC News break with Belle Puri.
Good afternoon. The BC government will work with the agriculture industry to better protect crops from weather extremes. Last year, an intense cold snap decimated many plants that had to be replaced. The province says food producers face the same challenge this year. Construction of a 5-story cancer centre has been confirmed for Kamloops. Building will start next year and take 3 years. The $395 million facility will include space for radiation treatment, an outpatient unit, and an additional MRI suite. Nanaimo RCMP say there's been an increase in gift card scams and other online scams. Social media users, police say, should hear alarm bells if they suddenly receive requests for money or personal information. And Lillooet RCMP have a warning for the public to be on the lookout for wolves. Last week, there were a number of sightings in town. The public is encouraged to keep all pets and livestock secured when possible. A look at the BC weather on the north coast, an afternoon of sun and cloud, a high of 3. In the Peace region, the light snow should be stopping right about now. Then you'll have a temperature of -4. For the central interior, light snow ending late this afternoon, a high of -2. In the southeast, a good chance of showers or flurries, a high of 6. Southern interior, mainly cloudy, and 5. And along the south coast, Greater Victoria, a chance of showers, a high of 6. And in Metro Vancouver, mainly cloudy and a high of 7. That's the CBC News from Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Bill. Good to hear from you. And welcome back to everyone joining us on CBC Radio 1 and live streaming on the CBC News app, cbc.ca/BC, and on the CBC Vancouver YouTube page. Hello to everyone listening in Port Alberni at 98.1 FM. And good day to you, to those of you hearing us at Haggensburg at 88.1 FM. Sticking with our top story today, talking about cuts at Bell Media. We're going to read some emails now. Sandra writes us to say, I find it reprehensible that Bell Media is closing these stations because of corporate greed. Mergers, corporate lobbying. What about the free competitive market? I am really upset at the lack of investigative reporting and disrespect for this profession. I'm very worried about relying on social media for news. It's a very sad situation. Elizabeth sent us this message. I salute Premier David Eby's strong stance, and his message is absolutely correct. This is a very dangerous point for all of us. We need far more reporting, certainly not less, so that people can listen to a variety of news reports. And Jill says, here in Victoria, we have an excellent TV station, which is Check News, one of BC's oldest, if not BC's oldest, which nearly stopped broadcasting a number of years ago. Fortunately for us, the employees put in their own money to buy the station and own it themselves. Perhaps the radio station employees who are being closed should attempt something like that. We appreciate all of your calls and emails, and we'll have much more on this story throughout the day. The BC government has now released its snowpack report, and the results are stark. BC's snowpack is about 60% of what it usually is for this time of year. Every single basin in our big province is below normal. Now, for more on what this means, let's bring in our CBC climate and science specialist, Darius Madavi. Darius, thanks for being here. What's your biggest takeaway from this report? Because when you sent it in, it was frightening, actually.
Yes, well, 40% below normal. Now, last month, we were sitting at 45% below usual. So we've come up a little bit. Last month was record-breaking. This month is either there or close to there across the basins in BC. And so the regions where we're the lowest are across the south coast. But as you said, across the province, we are below average. And so what really took me by surprise was the fact that despite having that serious cold snap and some record snow on the south coast, that didn't really improve our conditions, mainly because we then had that prolonged warm period as that atmospheric river fed in, bringing moisture and warmth not just to the coast, but across BC. So across the province, we were seeing temperatures anywhere from 10 to 25 to even 30 degrees above normal for a prolonged period of time. And that really decimated whatever snowpack we did manage to build up. Now, precipitation levels have still been below average pretty much across BC, particularly in the northeast, where they're not looking as bad as some other places, but still below average. And considering the drought conditions that we came into this winter with in that area, especially grim news there.
Any signs of changes in the months ahead, like more moisture, more snow, anything?
In terms of precipitation, it's harder to predict. We may see some more precipitation, but temperatures are expected to remain above average for the next few months. El Nino is still happening. It is starting to taper off, but we will still continue to see warmer than average temperatures across the province, more than likely across the next few months. We may see some another outbreak of Arctic air, which is what brought us our cold snap last time and started to show some better promises because the polar vortex is disrupted, which raises the chance but doesn't really guarantee anything. And at the moment, it looks like if that's going to happen, it'll happen in the east. So not really much improvement there. I would say that temperature is expected to remain above average. And at this point in the year, we've usually seen about 2/3 of the snowpack that we will see over the entire year. So only a third left that we could start to see some improvement. And that's not a lot to bring us back up to normal. And so, you know, if we're going to look on the bright side, flooding will be a little bit less severe this year. That's pretty much all the good news I have for you.
And what does this mean for the drought season? And we should clarify, there's still regions in our province which are in drought right now.
Yes, winter drought is, it has to be a very severe drought conditions heading into the winter to still feel those impacts so severely throughout the season. And so what we're seeing right now is not precedented. I mean, we've been talking about drought stories for a year now. I mean, we came into these drought conditions in the fall of 2022, and they have not improved since then across virtually the entire province. So in this update, we saw that the southern interior did improve in some of the basins. The Okanagan and the Thompson areas saw their snowpack levels improve from around 65 to 70% of normal to around 75 to 80%. It's around 10-15% increase, but not much. And then the big story, I would say, in terms of the drought is that for the first month of the drought season, pretty much the only indicator of what's going to happen is the snowpack levels and the drought conditions that we came into the season with. So having both of those things be terrible and in some of the worst conditions that we've seen in decades, and expecting warmer than average temperatures puts us in a precarious position.
To say the least, double whammy.
Yeah, not to be grim.
But we have to be realistic. Not the only big news out today. A pretty major report that you found came from the EU's Climate Change Service. What happened there?
Yes, pretty big news day. In terms of what the EU has come out with is their sort of monthly report on global temperatures. And this is the first time as of January 2024 that we have seen a 12-month period over 1.5 degrees Celsius. So 2023 was just off, high 1.4 degrees Celsius. We're now at 1.52 over the last 12-month period. Now, it's difficult to put this into context because it really depends on where you are. If we look at the map that the EU has put out, the Western Canada over the last month in January was actually cooler than average because of that cold snap, whereas Eastern Canada was quite a lot warmer than average. And around the world, a lot warmer than average. We're talking the warmest January ever recorded, which then puts us at 8 months in a row with the warmest of that month ever recorded. And so the next couple months, as we continue to move into sort of shifting that window of the 12-month period, I would expect that even though El Nino is slowly starting to taper off, we're going to see more of those highest 12-month period records broken because the beginning of 2023 wasn't actually that bad. It was relatively cool. I mean, we're talking still a degree Celsius above normal, but that's the baseline that we're at now. And so these factors like El Nino and the amount of radiation that we're getting from the sun, which was a little bit higher than average this year, increase the temperature maybe a couple tenths of a degree. The baseline that we're at is incredibly high and we're feeling it more than ever. And so in the months ahead, even though the sort of Paris Climate Accords, their 1.5 degree standard that they've set, that's over a period of at least 3 to 5 years. Some climate scientists even argue it should be 10 to 20 years. But the fact that we've broken it once now is concerning, and the fact that the baseline that we've set is so high, even in an El Nino year, is just something else.
And particularly when Canada and other countries sign on to capping emissions and meeting those climate targets, right?
Yeah, well, yes, we are seeing still...
Or attempting to.
Yes, exactly. We're seeing the global emissions continue to rise. So over the last 10 to 20 years, emissions have declined in countries like Canada and the US and the UK. But that's because those metrics are based on the emissions that we produce here. And what we are doing in these more developed countries is exporting our emissions to other places. So even though it looks like we are declining our emissions and places like India or China are increasing theirs, it's because we are putting all of our industry, all of our emissions in these countries and then saying they're the ones causing it, even though it's our consumption and our demand for things that are really driving those emissions.
CBC Science and Climate Specialist Darius Mahdavi, always appreciate your time and your expertise, friend. And we'll see you on radio, or hear and see you on radio, and tonight at 6 o'clock and 11 on CBC Television. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Tonight, CBC has a new reality show premiering on TV and on CBC Gem. The Great Canadian Throwdown will grace our screens in all its muddy, explosive glory, and it's all about pottery. And joining us now is Judge Brendan Tang. Brendan, thanks for joining us.
I am super stoked to be here.
And you have brought us some wares, some creations. Before we get to these, tell us more about the show. What are we going to see?
So we're going to see a competition show that you might be familiar with, along the same sort of lines as the Great Canadian Bake Off. So it's a lot of camaraderie and a lot of fun, and it's very cozy. But we're going to be making pottery and working in ceramics. We have 10 potters from across the country, 2 from New Brunswick, which always kind of blows me away. And we get them
smaller but mighty.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And we get them together, and they just start working, and it's amazing.
And this is based, as we saw, this is based in Gravel Island, isn't it?
Yeah. We took over the old Emily Carr campus.
Fabulous. What was it like working in there?
It was wild because, I used to teach in that building. I now teach in the new building. So there was a bit of a trip there, kind of going into the old building and being really familiar with it. But I think it was also really kind of a great use. The building has a lot of good bones to it. So, yeah, it was nice to be there.
And how long have you, you were a student at Emily Carr, is that right as well?
Actually, I started in Nanaimo, and then I went out east and learned in Halifax.
Oh, my apologies. But how long have you been teaching, or did you teach at Emily Carr?
I am been working there since 2011. Yeah, so.
What brought you to this program?
I have no idea. Are you talking about ceramics or the TV show?
Well, a little from column A and a little from column B.
Well, ceramics, it was a material that I was trying or playing with out of high school, and then really got to meet some amazing potters on Vancouver Island, Josie and Vic Diffuse, Jovic Pottery, and they kind of took me under their wing, and I got to learn about the material. I always thought I would go into the art world or go into animation, but, I really fell in love with ceramics. Actually, it's like my body fell in love with ceramics because it's such a physical practice.
And when for the benefit of people who are going to watch the show and have it described to them, when you're at the wheel, if we can call it, I think that's what it's called, take us through what that process is like. When you decide to make something.
Yeah, so it's always a tricky one because there's so much possibility for what you can make on the wheel. And so for me, I'm a big planner. I know a lot of people fly by the seat of their pants, but I think one of the wonderful things about the material or working on the wheel, and I think this is what draws a lot of people to it, is you really can't be thinking anything else other than what's going on in front of you. Your mind starts to wander, and it's off center. It's like
it's a little wobbly.
Oh, lots of wobbly. It's it's actually like doing yoga, you know, so your brain goes out the yoga studio, you're just going to fall over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you don't want to multitask too much when you're doing it.
No.
You talked about physically, like it's it's obviously a tactile experience. What's it like to get in there and actually do it? I think, and forgive me, this may be dating myself, but some people may only really remember Potter's Wheel from a certain movie with Demi Moore and Patrick Swayze in
rest in
Ghost.
peace.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there is a physicality to it that at first it seems like you need a lot of upper body strength, but I think it's just muscle memory and where your body goes and how it all works together. What I will say is, it's almost like learning a dance or, like a kind of a physical thing like that, which I also think is probably why there's such a draw to it now.
Yeah, and if you're hearing a slight rocking on the radio, it's because we've got some pieces here that Brendan has brought in. Why don't you give us a description of what we got here on the table?
Yeah, so these are works that I do, and it's from a series called Manga Ormolu, and it's where I'm kind of hybridizing very ancient Chinese ceramics and more blue and white tradition with robots from the future and things like that. And it kind of falls in, it plays with ceramic history, it plays with ideas of identity and that sort of stuff.
How long does it take to do a piece like this?
Oh my God. These will take me like a month to 2 months to do, which is wild because we do not give our potters nearly enough time to do what they do.
There's a tease for you. How long do you give them?
We give them, let's say, less than a day.
Less than a day.
I mean, if you put all the hours together, we spread it out over a week, but we don't give them a lot of time.
And not to spoil any episodes, but what sort of things do they come up with that limited time?
They come up with things that I don't even think is possible. I also teach, as we said earlier, I teach at the university, and we are giving them such little time that I'm questioning how much time I give my own students for projects.
They teach.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They do some wonderful things. The artists that we have on the show are so talented and so savvy with how they make things, so the crafting of it, but they can also imbue their ideas in it, which is wild.
We also know that Vancouver's own Seth Rogen is on the show as well.
Yes.
And we're seeing some of the viz that he likes to do, and he occasionally likes to puff and do his stuff on the wheel. What was it like working with him?
Seth Rogen was fun. I won't lie to you, I was completely starstruck and just kind of blown away. And there was like the mini mantra in my head, just like, play it cool, Brandon. Don't make this weird for Seth. And but after a while, like we would get talking about the clay and what the show is about and all that sort of stuff. And we were just like two clay nerds hanging out and talking about mud.
And he makes, and we have to explain this perhaps, he makes some unique things because he is a fan of smoking cannabis, etc. So what does he make?
He, believe it or not, he's really good at making bongs and ashtrays, which is really hilarious because I think ceramics has, especially here on the West Coast, has such a long history in that particular functional object.
From robots to what looks like perhaps Ming Dynasty, all the way up to cannabis.
Yeah.
What about the mood on the show? What can viewers expect? Is it a brutal competition? We know certain reality shows can be a bit tough.
Yeah, I think with our show, it is a competition, but it's a competition very much with the material and the artists themselves. I find, like right off the bat, we saw the potters helping each other out and not trying to sabotage one another, but genuinely helping and giving tips. And I think that's so much of the ceramic community, which is we share a lot of things, we help each other do firings and all these sorts of things. And so I feel like that part of our community has definitely imbued itself into the show. And so you really just get to see people really challenging themselves and stepping up to being creative individuals.
It's rather Canadian, isn't it?
I love it.
It's like the baking show. It's like people are helping each other out. That's what happens. The firing process.
Yes.
Can you explain that for those of us who don't know?
Yeah.
What goes into that?
Yeah. So the firing process, what we do is we make the clay, or the people work in their sculptures and they make it with the wet clay that comes out of a bag. And then it has to dry and it goes into the first kiln, which is called the bisque firing. Then it comes out, then they paint it, and then it goes back into the kiln for a glaze firing. And essentially what that's doing, the first firing is hardening the clay. The second firing is hardening the clay more and also turning the glaze into glass, molten glass. And so there's like on my pieces here, there's a fine skin of glass that's on top of that. And so that's what that is. It sounds very straightforward, but there is so much room for drama. And there is no shortage of that. Like, I would say if there's a villain on this show, it would be the kilns.
And so can you give us an example of again, not to give away too many spoilers, what might happen if somebody doesn't use the right kiln? What happens?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges of it, because we're working within a television scale.
Yes.
I told you that it takes a month for me to do the thing here. Most of that time is actually letting this thing dry. If you don't let it dry, if it goes into the kiln, the moisture in it will expand too quickly and you get explosions.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Bang.
Yeah.
Actual bangs and pops.
Yeah, bangs and pops. Actually, it almost sounds like somebody's fighting inside the kiln, like trying to get out, like, you've trapped somebody in the back of your car. Just a terrible reference.
Oh, my goodness. So a similar series has done quite well in the UK, and we saw similar success with British Bake Off, etc.
Yes.
What does it feel like to bring the format to Canada, and particularly here on the West Coast?
Yeah, I thought it was it's such a great mix for what we do in Canada. And I think it's really also important for us as Canadians to see incredibly talented and gifted people. I think for the creative industry, we often look down south for that sort of thing, and ceramics is no different than any other industry. And so I am so happy to be celebrating and being part of highlighting the talent that we have here, because I think as Canadians, we always think, oh, what's happening down south, what's happening across the pond, but we have so much to be proud of here.
Particularly here in BC, we know there's a large artist community all across the province, and our wonderful colleague Margaret Gallagher features a lot of people in North by Northwest, we know, and a real community space. For somebody who's interested in getting into doing pottery, what would you tell them about how to get started?
We are, especially here in Vancouver, are having such a moment in ceramics, and there are so many studios, walk-in studios. There's also community centers that have studios. If you want to step up your game, you could come join me at Emily Carr or any of the other Capilano or Langara has a wonderful program for more formal training. But I think if you just want to kind of get your hands dirty, there's so many studios all over the Lower Mainland, which blows my mind because, well, we know what space is like here. So it's wild that people are setting up studios, but it's really fantastic.
Can people make a living doing this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say it's easier to make a living now at making ceramics than it was when I was coming through in the 90s. And I would say it's because of social media. It is such a wonderful material to look at the process of wheel throwing and hand building and stuff like that. Then I have students that leave our program and just post things on their Instagram or on Etsy or Shopify or whatever, and they're immediately selling work. They don't my day, you had to go to craft sales and you have to lug everything and pack it up and blah, 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 blah. Now it's just they just post it online, which costs us nothing, and then they just pay shipping to send out their work.
So we know for fellow judges, we believe Jennifer Robertson from Schitt's Creek fame didn't know much about pottery before this show.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about her journey to this craft.
Oh my God, it's wonderful because I feel like she's a wonderful access point for a lot of the audience that aren't familiar with the material, and she's going to be asking those questions that the audience is going to be like, ask them about this, and she's such a delight, and she's hilarious. She would have Natalie, the other judge, and myself cracking up. So I think it's really wonderful seeing her sort of understand the material, and she would be asking us about what's going on, because we would be making faces going, ooh, I don't know about that, and she'd be like, what's going on? And
you mentioned 2 New Brunswick potters.
Yes.
How many people do we have from BC, if any?
We have 2 BC folks. Yeah.
And what do we learn about their journey and their lives?
I think we learn about all the different ways to approach the material. I think we often think about ceramics as a functional material to make pots and teacups and all that sort of stuff. But I think with those 2 particular artists, and all of the artists actually, is that they're using the material as a vehicle to talk about what they're going through or their family history, or it becomes almost like a diary in 3 dimensions. And it's really wonderful and quite beautiful to see how far these artists are pushing themselves to imbue their story into things, and in some cases still maintain its functionality. And it's just really wonderful. And I know that the producers, both Frantic and Seth, really wanted the elevation of the material.
We know that there's a compressed time frame for them to get these things done. and television being what it is, and shows. Anything about the thought process behind that?
Like I think the producers probably gave the artists a heads up in terms of going into the challenges, but more often than not, because they're artists, they're going to change their mind. And so they would be making things, and I think some of the crew would be like, oh, that's not what they said they would do. But, I think it's really wonderful. Like once they kind of knew where they are, saw the other competition, got our feedback, they kind of made different choices and that sort of thing to kind of speed up the process in terms of what they were doing.
Do you think it'll give viewers an extra sense of appreciation for what goes into this?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
How so?
I think, your comment about Ghost, I think a lot of people sort of see it as a very sensual, Zen-like material. And you will see actually how manic panic this material can really be. It is one of those things, I often tell people that learning ceramics is like learning to play the violin. You're going to sound terrible for a little bit, and it'll take a while.
And what do you want viewers and perhaps others to, if people are interested in getting into this, even into the show?
Yeah.
You talked about sort of getting into it, but if they're not in a position to go to school or anything like that, where would you direct them?
Yeah, I would say, just be and find what you have in your community and just try and be creative. I think that's one of the real takeaways of the show, is to sort of see and celebrate human creativity, like the humanity of that. I think we wallow and we get exposed to a lot of things that are happening in the world and that are not great and really bring us down and amp up our anxiety. But I think creativity can be a really beautiful celebration. And I think that's what the show does for me.
And where will you be watching tonight?
We're going to hold an event at Emily Carr, which is, I convinced them to use the big theater. And so they may regret this, but I think it's going to be a blast.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Brendan Tang, we really appreciate your time and your expertise in bringing these wonderful things in to show us, and all the best with the show. And the Great Canadian Pottery Throwdown debuts on CBC Gem and on CBC Television tonight at 8 o'clock. Thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate your time. That's it for our show. Thank you for calling in, emailing, and joining the discussion. You can always email us, bctoday@cbc.ca.